Last couple of weeks, John has been urging me to talk more about the steps of individuation. Okay, and as a man, I'm not particularly good about women's individuation, even though I wrote a novel that included a woman's individuation, Memoirs of a Woman. But when I wrote that novel, I was referring to this book, which is Women Who Run with the Wolves by Clarissa Pinkola, Estes. And Dr. Estes has been a Jungian analyst since forever out in Colorado. And so one of the stories in her Women Who Run with the Wolves, it's a series of short stories that have been used in classic fairy tales, is called Vasilisa the Wise. And the story itself, let's see, the story itself begins on page 74, The Doll in Her Pocket, Vasilisa the Wise. I'm not going to tell you the story, but at the end of that story, she's got about a 40-page dissertation on women's, well, she's talking about how women get their intuition. Okay, so this is a fundamental task for women, is to become intuitive, and if they're not just naturally intuitive. And so they have to go through 9 tasks. Clarissa did this 40-page dissertation on these 9 steps, but I'm not going to read that. But she did list the 9 steps and put in italics the fundamentals of it. So I thought I would read that to you.
This is women's individuation.
This is how women cultivate and develop their intuition, which I have interpreted for many years as women's individuation. Okay, and so when I was writing my novel, I wanted to write a novel about the first woman prime minister of Japan, and since such a person is certainly fictitious still, I had to figure out, now how am I going to do this? I wanted to take her from age 15 to age 75, and so I happened to be reading her book, and she gave me the 9 tasks. So what I did was I took that template, the 9 tasks, and I put it on this Japanese environment, and that's what the first part of the novel was, the first 26 chapters or so. So anyway, the first task, allowing the good mother to die. Okay, I'm sure all mothers will be happy to hear this, mothers of daughters. Okay. Yeah, so the first task for, well, she calls this nosing out the facts, the retrieval of intuition as initiation. That's what she's got in the top of every page here. So nosing out the facts, the retrieval of intuition as initiation. So women need to develop their intuition if they don't have it naturally. Okay, so task 1, allowing the good mother to die. And here's what she says about it. The psychic tasks of this stage in a woman's life are these: accepting that the ever-watchful, hovering, protective psychic mother is not adequate as a central guide for one's future instinctual life. The too good mother dies. Taking on the task of being on one's own, developing one's own consciousness about danger, intrigue, politics. Becoming alert to oneself, for oneself, letting die what must die. As the too good mother dies, the new woman is born. So that's task number 1.
Well, I know a lot of women who haven't reached that point.
Yeah. Right. And
really, it hits me so strongly. Like, I thought it was a universal thing. I mean, I thought it was maybe a cultural thing or something.
Well, if you know
It
women,
surprises me every time I see it. It's like, well, can't you see that you're still tied to your mother?
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I obviously, if you know women that are like that, they may have been brought up in the '80s when, you know, everybody got a trophy and all that good stuff, right? and so, you know, Estes is into the shadow, among other things, which brings me to the second task, which is exposing the crude shadow. The tasks of this time are learning even more mindfully to let go of the overly positive mother, finding that being good, being sweet, being nice will not cause life to sing. So in parentheses she says, Vasilisa becomes a slave, but it does not help. Experiencing directly one's own shadow nature, particularly the exclusionary, jealous, and exploitive aspects of self, the stepmother and stepsister, owning these, making the best relationship one can with the worst parts of oneself, letting the pressure build between who one is taught to be and who one really is, ultimately working toward letting the old self die and the new intuitive self be born. So, letting the pressure build between who one is taught to be and who one really is. Okay, that's so. If you think about Cinderella, the Cinderella story, well, all women are Cinderella, right? They're always, all women are hoping for the handsome prince and everything, but all women are also the wicked stepmother and the two wicked stepsisters, and you have to recognize that in yourself. I think that's the point she's making here. Okay, so the third task, you know, pipe up does if you hear anything that seems weird to you. Okay, so the third task, navigating in the dark. Okay, so these are the psychic tasks of this time. Consenting to venture into the locus of deep initiation, entering the forest, and beginning to experience the new and dangerous feeling Newman of being in one's intuitive power. Learning to develop sensitivity as regards direction to the mysterious unconscious, and relying solely on one's inner senses. Learning the way back home to the wild mother, quote, heeding the doll's directions, because Vasilisa was carrying a doll who was talking to her, and it was her intuition talking to her,
You
right?
said the wild mother. What did you say there about that?
All right, so okay. Learning the way back home to the wild mother, heeding the doll's directions, learning to feed intuition, feeding the doll, letting the frail know-nothing maiden die even more, shifting power to the doll, i.e. the intuition. So the doll represents the intuition projected, right, onto the doll she's holding. And so learning to trust what the doll is saying to her. And in this story, and also in my story, she was having conversations with her doll. So, okay, so learning to navigate in the dark. You're good with that one, right? Okay, so the fourth task, facing the wild hag. In this part of the tale, Vasilisa meets the wild hag face to face. The tasks of this meeting are these: being able to stand the face of the fearsome wild goddess without wavering, meeting up with the Baba Yaga, familiarizing oneself with the arcane, the odd, the otherness of the wild, residing in Baba Yaga's house for a while, taking some of her values into our lives, thereby becoming ourselves a little odd, eating her food. In this story, she was eating her food, so that was taking her values. Okay, learning to face great power in others and subsequently one's own power. Letting the frail and too sweet child die back even further. Letting the frail and too sweet child die back even further. So this childhood keeps dying so that you can become a woman. The fifth task, serving the non-rational. Okay. The psychic tasks of this time of learning are these: staying with the hag goddess, acclimating to the great wildish powers of the feminine psyche, coming to recognize her, your power, and the powers of inner purifications, unsoiling, sorting, nourishing, building energy and ideas, washing the yaga's clothes, cooking for her, cleaning her house, and sorting out the elements. So understanding what it is to live with the wild hag. Right, hag, wild goddess. So that's the fifth task, is serving the non-rational. The hag is non-rational. Okay. The sixth task, separating this from that. Okay, a woman's tasks are these: learning fine discrimination, separating one thing from the other with finest discernment, learning to make fine distinctions in judgment, sorting the mildewed corn from the good corn, and sorting the poppy seeds from a pile of dirt, observing the power of the unconscious and how it works even when the ego is not aware, the pairs of hands which appear in the air. More learning about life, this is corn, and death, which is poppy seeds in this story. So more learning about life and death, but separating this from that.
What's that stage called?
Separating this from that. It's the sixth task, and it's the task of discernment. So learning fine discrimination. So it's actually a masculine activity, right? Because as we learn.
Let me ask you a question about that. Jung was pretty much saying that the feminine does not do well with discrimination.
That's what he's saying, and I'm saying this right, and I'm saying this task may be a masculine-ish task, right? And so she's talking about what it takes for a woman to gain her intuition, and to gain her intuition, she might have to turn on some masculine energy within herself. Okay, it doesn't mean she's going to become gay. It doesn't mean she's going to become a man, but she has the masculine within her, just as we have the feminine, and she needs to turn that part of herself on in order to turn on her intuition. That's the way I read it.
Get that from the positive animus or the negative animus? The positive animus.
Both. Because the point is, it's discernment, right? So she has to discern between positive animus and negative animus, between positive anima and negative anima. That's the point of the task.
So is the animus individuating at the same time? Is it part of the stages?
Well, the animus is different. The animus is there all the time, right? What Estes is talking about here is this is a process. Okay, animus is a thing that you can describe. It's an archetype, right? It's one of the bigs in Mysterium Cognitionis. I mean, out of the 5 or 6 big things that Jung talks about in Mysterium, which is a book this thick, 2 of them are anima and animus. And one of them is the syzygy, which is the combination of the anima and animus in the pleroma type thing. So the masculine and feminine aspects of our lives run through everything, right? But what Estes is talking about here is the process of development, from being a young girl to being a mature woman able to get through life in the real world, right? And so, okay, so the seventh task, asking the mysteries. So Vasilisa asks the Yaga some good questions. The tasks of this time are these: questioning and trying to learn more about the life, death, life, nature, and how it functions. Vasilisa asks about the horseman, learning the truth about being able to understand all the elements of the wild nature. To know too much can make one old too soon. Okay, so, why do we not tell kids the facts of life when they're 8 years old? Because learning the facts of life makes you old too soon. And, I suppose on the farms.
For the kids, you can't learn fast enough.
Yeah, but I certainly appreciate my childhood. I don't know about you, but I certainly appreciate having been somewhat protected during that time. I mean, there were a few little oops along the way, but it took a while before I started to catch on, right? And I was 11 or 12 before I really got the facts of life, and even then I didn't really get it. But
So that was one thing when I was teaching at the university. I looked at the students, and some of them were just so tense, and they wanted to make sure they got an A, and they're like this. And I said, this is the last place you'll get to, do something and make mistakes, and it won't hurt you.
yeah,
And I didn't care so much. I would watch how they progressed and what they were accomplishing and what they were learning, and I didn't care about the grades.
right.
You didn't just have a numerical value on a sheet of paper. That was so great.
Yeah. Well, that's yeah.
That's good
And-
you said that, because I was reading about a book by Osho about development with education, and that we put all this pressure on kids to get it right, get it perfect, get 100%. He said, they're never going to learn it because they're not making mistakes.
Yeah.
So it's exactly what you were saying. You're very
You
wise.
gotta have a place to make mistakes. That's
Right.
what learning's all about. What's learning if you don't get to make
Right.
mistakes?
And, my father knew I wasn't going to play in the NFL, but he let me play football for a couple of years and learned the hard way that I wasn't going to play in the NFL. Nor for the Philadelphia Phillies. Okay.
Questioning and learning more about the life, death, nature, and how it functions. And what was the rest of that?
Well, that was it.
That was it.
Wait, what was
Yeah.
number 7?
Okay.
Number 7.
You want me to read it again?
What was the heading? I missed that.
Okay. The seventh task, asking the mysteries.
Asking this.
Asking the mysteries. So you're asking your adults about the mysteries. Or I think what more commonly happens is that for boys and girls, you learn the mysteries from your peers. Right. One of them is ahead of you, and one of you,
Than a book.
Whisper giggle.
yeah, one of you is ahead of the rest, and so it's a whisper giggle type thing. But I think it's more or less the facts of life, if we put it simply. Finding out what the facts of life are. If you live on a farm, obviously you learn young. Okay, so the eighth task, standing on all fours, quote unquote. Just to give the background, Baba Yaga is repelled by Vasilisa's blessing from her dead mother and gives Vasilisa light, a fiery skull on a stick, and tells her to go. Okay, so the task of this part of the tale are these: taking on immense power to see and affect others, receiving the skull, looking at one's life situations in this new light, finding the way back to the old step family. Okay, so I don't know. I think for a young woman, it's seeing that you have power over young men, right? And that's the power, and it's maturity, knowing that you do have some power in that way. Looking at one's life situations in this new light. In other words, in the story, it's finding the way back to the old step family. So you're going back. It's like you can never go back. You've heard that old aphorism, right?
Can't go home again.
Yeah, you can never go back. I mean, I've gone back to places I've lived in my childhood, and you can never go back. The people aren't there. The place has changed.
You've changed.
Yeah, you've changed. The mystery of the place at that time.
It's disorienting.
Okay, one more task. Okay, so the 9th task is recasting the shadow. And so just to highlight the story, Vasilisa journeys home with the fiery skull on the stick. She almost throws it away, but the skull reassures her. Once back home, the skull watches the stepsisters and stepmother and burns them to ashes. Vasilisa lives well and for a long time afterward. So these are the psychic tasks of this time. So it's the 9th task, recasting the shadow. Using one's acute vision, fiery eyes, to recognize and react to the negative shadow of one's own psyche and or negative aspects of persons and events in the outer world, recasting the negative shadows in one's psyche with Hagfire, the wicked stepfamily which formerly tortured Vasilisa, is turned to cinders. I'm not taking back the steps that I gave you earlier, okay, the stages of individuation that I gave you earlier. I'm saying that this is what Estes says is the retrieval of intuition as initiation. So this is kind of a woman's initiation into womanhood. Okay. So it's really the passage between the ingenue stage and being a mature woman, entering, well, sort of an innocent young teenager, young teenage girl. Everything's
The one
fine.
that will date somebody their own age.
Yeah, very, very idealistic. I mean, the way young teenage girls are.